This is Nick Ricada, and you're listening to a Sunset Sea production. It's better than whiskey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 34 of the Imperial Tides podcast. I'm Holden, and I'm here with my co-host Simone. And today we're going to be talking about episode 11 of 14 of the West German 1980 television miniseries, Berlin Alexanderplatz. Now, this episode is titled Knowledge is Power, and the Early Bird Catches the Worm. And to give you guys a brief little play-by-play of what happens in this particular episode, it starts off with Franz basically asking Reinhold to let him back into Pum's gang. And so, for those of you who may not, just to provide as much background information as possible, the context here is that Franz is our main protagonist, of course, and Reinhold was a friend that he had made a little earlier on in the series, and Pum's is this gang leader. Basically, he has this criminal syndicate that a bunch of people they go around robbing robbing houses, committing burglaries, that sort of thing. And Reinhold and Franz actually worked together during one of these particular operations. Franz was sort of roped into it, and the long and short of it is that basically Reinhold ended up pushing Franz out of their car while they were getting away from while they were trying to escape the scene of the crime, and Franz ended up getting run over by the car that was immediately behind them, and lost his right arm, which was his dominant arm, and so now he's an amputee, and that's Reinhold's fault, basically. And so they have a lot of history between the two of them. There's some bad blood there because Reinhold felt as though Franz betrayed him because their whole friendship started out as precipitated by this weird sort of deal that they had. Because Reinhold he's sort of a pathological serial womanizer. And he had this problem with women where he would, get these women, get into relationships with a bunch of women, all these various women, and would end up getting sick of them. And so he would have Franz take them over. He basically passes girlfriends over to Franz, and Franz would, keep them warm for a while until he'd get rid of one, take in the next, and the other, and so on and so forth. It would have been this endless cycle, but Franz basically cut Reinhold off one day, and that really hurt Reinhold for some reason. He took it very personally, and so ever since then they've kind of been at each other. Although it's mostly Reinhold being against Franz. Franz doesn't seem to harbor any sort of resentment towards Reinhold, even after he lost his arm. So it's an interesting dynamic that we'll probably get into a little later on in this discussion. But yeah, that's the context in case any of you needed it. And so from there, Franz asks Reinhold to bring him back into the syndicate. Reinhold consults Pums about this, and Pums actually decides to let Franz back in. But at first, none of the other criminals trust him, except for, of course, Mech, who is Franz's longtime friend. Mech swears by Franz that he wouldn't be the type of person to snitch on any of them. He's not that kind of person, right? So he vouches for him, and that ends up getting Pums to put have the go-to on it, and so Franz is back. And it's only after Franz does well during another burglary that the other criminals begin to warm up to him again. And in fact, one of the other criminals, Bruno, shows up to Franz's apartment to give him money for his work. And it seems that things are looking up for Franz. But Mitzi, his girlfriend, doesn't like that Franz is doing this, and it creates a rift in the relationship. And she and Ava are confused as to why Franz is doing what he's doing now. But Herbert, who is Ava's boyfriend, of course, believes that Franz is back in as a way to earn the criminals' trust, all the rest of the criminals' trust, so that he can seek out revenge for losing his arm. Meanwhile, Reinhold interrogates Mitzi in the stairwell of Franz's apartment in another scene to try and figure out why Franz is working with them again. He doesn't get any clear information from her, but he does manage to make Mitzi suspicious of Franz by telling her about how Franz used to take in women for him, and later on, Franz has Reinhold hide beneath the sheets of his bed for some reason, so he can show him what a quote-unquote decent girl looks like. And Mitzi is the example of the decent girl that he wants to show him, but when she comes home, she reveals to Franz that she slept with the nephew of one of her clients, and that she might be in love with him. But that she also came back home regardless to show that her loyalty still stands with Franz. Franz is still not happy with this and almost actually beats Mitzi to death in a similar fashion to how he killed his wife, Ida. History seems as if it's going to repeat itself until Reinhold steps in as an unlikely hero and diffuses the situation. The episode ends with Franz and Mitzi somehow managing to reconcile, and Franz takes Mitzi out to the countryside to make up for almost killing her. They come back to the forest where they spent time together at the start of their relationship, and the episode ends with Mitzi promising to stay with Franz through thick and thin, and Franz not fully understanding why she is the way she is. And there's also a scene immediately before that in which we see Franz and Mitzi go to this sort of outdoor cafe, and one of the waitresses there seems to recognize Franz. She seems to be someone from his past. It might be Ida's sister from the first episode, his ex-wife's, his dead wife's sister from episode 1, the woman that he tried to, I guess, force himself on at the very beginning of the series. But it might be her. It might not be. I'm not entirely sure. But I'm sure they'll expand upon it later on. So yeah, I don't know, Simone. Is there anything I missed from that brief play-by-play before we move on to the discussion portion of the podcast? Is there anything you'd like to add to the summary?
No, no.
Okay, so well, Simone, what would you rate this episode out of 10, and why do you think? What does this episode deserve?
Yeah, I didn't expect that this episode will turn up this way. The way I see it, it's quite far from how each episode that we have covered last few the last episodes that we have covered is really different from this. I see similar themes, but in I didn't expect that it would up this way. It's kind of weird. Not exactly. There are a lot of things that happened here that I thought that would happen. So maybe we can cover it. But maybe I read around 5 or 6. I yeah yeah.
Okay. Well, just to give to give us some examples, Simone, what were some of the things that you didn't expect to happen that did happen that made you feel that way?
Um, I get the story how it flows. I like what are the what are the what really are the contexts that are taking place with each character. Why they why why these things lead to this, or what are the reasons that these actions that they portray in this particular episode is all about. But I guess that it didn't flow that well. Yeah, especially on uh, around passing all the dialogues or changing contexts that one might not agree or disagree. There are some sort of those things. You might be able to narrate it properly, but I guess there's some sort of interference that makes it kind of usual.
Yeah, yeah. I think the last couple episodes or so, I gave them all 8s, but I think for this one I'll have to give it a 7. So I'll have to drop it down a star point, I guess, from the average rating I would give for this kind of episode. Like I said, we've established that there are, I guess, primary episodes that move forward the main conflict of the series, and then there are secondary ones that sort of focus. They kind of hone in, they zoom in on a particular aspect of either Franz's character or of the world around them. And for me, there's a really interesting quality to this episode in particular. It has a certain mood to it, a certain atmosphere. But again, it is another episode that tends to drag at times. The extended conversations between characters, for me, as a viewer, it's starting to feel a little tedious at this point. There were moments that could have been shortened, for sure, I would say. But in a way, this episode is a return to form in the sense that it reveals to us an essential aspect of Franz's character. And I think what I really liked the most from this particular episode was how it ended with one of the most peaceful moments in the series in a long time, and how that relative peace between Franz and his girlfriend, latest girlfriend Mitzi, that peace only manifested itself after a burst of violence on Franz's part. And to me, that demonstrates very clearly that Franz needs to purge the violent part of himself at almost all times. He really is a ticking time bomb in the sense that it seems as if there will always be a need for him to be violent and commit extreme acts of aggression on those closest to him. It is an intrinsic inevitability to who and what he is, I would say. And I think there's something very profound in that, But to expound upon how I feel about the episode as a whole, I would say that, it's really weird. For me, it's like the dialogue. I understand what you mean by the dialogue. It's just It's just, how should I put this? It's like, I don't know, it's very written, I would say. It doesn't feel as organic as it used to. And I think part of the reason why that's the case is because it's like, I kind of feel as though like they're at this point in the series, they're kind of dragging it out. You know what I mean? I don't think each episode needs to be an hour long. I don't think they needed to have this many episodes for what would the, just compare, I guess to compare in terms of ratios, to compare the runtime to the amount of substance that's in each episode. I don't think they really needed to spend as much time kind of zooming in on this particular aspect of Franz's character or whatever. I feel like at this point they're kind of running in circles and not for any sort of artistic reason. I guess to make a comparison, I would say there, the show Mad Men, for example, that show is all about cycles. It's all about how the main character in that show, Don Draper, he's an ad executive. He's like this genius. He's this whiz when it comes to advertising. He's got a real skill for it. He's a prodigy. But then in all other aspects of his life, he's terrible. He's a completely dysfunctional person. And if it weren't for the fact that he's good at advertising, he wouldn't have any sort of worth or value. So it really does depend on advertising just to as the one thing that he's functional at. And they emphasize his dysfunctionality by having him in every each different season, by having him get with all these other women, be a womanizer, to cheat on his wife constantly, to do all these stupid things, to drink himself silly. He has all these terrible habits that ruin him, and it's the same old story every single time. Like it gets to a point where you know exactly what's going to happen. He's predictable. He has these patterns of behavior that they really do take control of him. Any sort of good aspects, any sort of good qualities that he has, they're completely overshadowed by the fact that he just can't control himself. He can't control the darkness within him. And Franz is a lot like that, but they're two very different characters, I would say, as well. Because Franz is pretty stupid. Franz is like an animal. He really is. He really is either like a child or a wild animal, in the sense that there's a certain naivety to him that it just doesn't. It makes it so that he can't really. It makes it so that there's a very high possibility that he'll never get over what it is that ails him. Because there's nothing to get over with someone like that. With someone like that, that's just part of who they are. It's like a dog. It's like you can't really, you can, to a certain extent, you can teach your dog how to be, I suppose, civilized or domesticated, let's just say. But with Franz, it's like that process would take a very long time. I just don't think that the society that he lives in would account for that. He's already been to jail. 4 years in prison did not help him at all. Didn't reform him. The systems that they have in place, the society it's falling apart in so many different ways that no one can afford to really bring Franz to a better state of mind. There's no way to rehabilitate him. So he's kind of he's left to his own devices. And I think I think there's something very poignant in how the series has just kind of progressed overall. It's like we've spent 10 episodes, it's been 11 episodes. We've just been waiting for something to happen either way, for him to either get better or to get worse. And it's like, it's kind of it's gone up and down, but nothing really profound has happened, to be honest. It's just this repetitive cycle. It's the same old things over and over again. And now that we're drawing, the series is drawing to a close, it's like I don't feel like anything of value nothing really happened, and maybe there's something, very poignant in that, maybe Franz is maybe he's not meant to ever have any sort of clear resolution. Maybe it's going to be very unsatisfying, the way things sort of turn out in the end. Maybe nothing's going to really change. Maybe nothing's going to really even happen. It's like a lot, and that's the funny thing about that. That's the mood that I was talking about when it comes to this episode. This episode creates this weird mood. There's this certain atmosphere to it, because it's like you could say that a lot happens on the surface. A lot happens, right? In this episode, Franz almost kills Mitzi the way that he killed Ida. That big moment almost happens, right? We see that scene, and yet it doesn't have any impact. It doesn't even really matter. It just kind of, it comes and it goes, and that's it. And then we move on. There's a lot of weird shit with the relationship between Franz and Reinhold. It's like Reinhold feels guilty about taking Franz's arm away, but he's also still kind of hell-bent on being this cold and calculated, kind of ruthless criminal, and taking him out. And there's just Mech is completely out of the picture now. He and Franz's bridge has been burnt almost entirely. There's just this numbness between the two of them. Everything's just in a weird place. It's in a weird place, and it's neither good nor bad, light nor dark. It simply is. So I don't know, Simone. Is there anything Is there anything you'd like to add to that? I mean, did you notice anything special about the mood of this episode, the feeling of this episode? I guess the atmosphere. Did you get anything from that, Simone? That you'd care to comment on?
Yeah, that's a good point, I guess. Even though there are not much team, I mean, there are some sort of not favorable teams that are coming along with each episode. I like how they are able to be consistent with the mood of the whole show. Even though in the last episode that we talk about, that we reviewed so far, there's a particular scene where you said that we noticed that maybe they change a different lens. They put a little they made it too bright or something. But anyway, it's you can notice that there's the mood that they are consistent with the mood at most part show. So the majority of this, and in this one, that's where I can say that that's what makes it still Berlin Alexanderplatz. But yeah, there are some consequences that we can get into, which led to that.
Sure. So what did you think of this episode's technical aspects, Simone? Good, bad, mediocre?
It's still good. My only problem with this is the narrative or the character of there are a lot of things that have been said, but it doesn't really matter that much at all. It just what makes this episode kind of successful, even though there are a lot of something falling apart. That I had noticed is the mood and the technical aspect is the number one reason for them to be able to execute that. Yeah, I still like the cinematography of it, especially when they when they shoot Bran, when he's alone staring at burglary that in the shop that Pams give him in his new job, and he has his own shot, with it's kind of dark everywhere, and then a light shown in his face, and in the background there are some not too visible lights out. It's they always kind of do that almost all the episodes. That's what I always noticed.
Yeah, it's one of those visual motifs. Yeah. What I will say about the episode's technical aspects, I mean, I think that the highlight of this episode was again the part where Franz is beating Mitzi, and to be honest, I felt like the actor playing Franz was a bit goofy. When it came, I guess to the I guess it would count as choreography, right? The choreography when he's supposedly hitting her, it's like the way he was swinging his arms, it took me out of it completely, But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's better that it's easier to analyze when it comes off as fake, because maybe if it was too real, I might have had a hard time stomaching it, processing it, whatever. But I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. To be honest, that scene it's really interesting because in a way it's farcical. In a way it doesn't actually carry the dramatic tension and the weight that it should. It's not as pregnant as it should be. Instead, it's very goofy, and it's almost laughable. Like you almost laugh it as opposed to like it's not disturbing the way in the way that you expect it to be, and it makes that falls in line with the way that the characters react to it as well. Because the very next day, of course, it's like completely okay. I mean, doing something like that, if a husband, if a male partner were to beat their female partner like that, especially today, that would be the end. They'd probably get arrested. I mean, they'd get arrested just for that. But in this fucked up world with all these fucked up people, it doesn't matter. It's just another day that ends in Y. It's Tuesday afternoon. It is what it is. Even the landlady who had seen this all before, I mean, she doesn't even do anything. She's just watching it all play out, watching it all unfold once more, even though she knows full well exactly what will happen at the outcome. And it's just, to me, I mean, it really is one of those moments. It's just it's representative of the whole of humanity. I mean, just look at the basic human currents. It's like we've had the French Revolution, we've had the Vietnam War, all this bullshit that happens, all of these cycles, all the terrible reactions people have to things, all of the politicization, all of the division, all of this segmentation. People picking their teams, getting in their groups. turning against one another. There's this lack of unity. It's like you get all of this crystallized in a single moment, in this one isolated moment, and it helps that the red light is flickering on and off, and it's all a fucking mess. Everyone's all sweaty and like they're all about to fucking collapse into like some sort of fever. There's something very feverish and sick about it. I love it. I'm starting to get into it almost. It's morbid, but it's like I don't know. I can't really get enough of it, to be honest. Like I want more of that. I want more of that feeling, that sort of that non-feeling, I guess. It's like it has to, in a way, that the series, just watching it kind of, the more you get into it, the more unhinged you become as a viewer. You start to get desensitized to this stuff. You start to get used to it. You start to look forward to it almost. It's very, there's something to be said about that. It's almost this subconscious process. It's like the writer and the director, they're taking a scalpel to your brain, just slowly, scraping off little thin layers of your of the gray matter or something. It's insane. It's the sensation that that watching this, this sensation that you get as a viewer, just in general, in the grand sum of things, it's something that's so intangible and so fundamentally important that you can't even really put it into words. But I don't know, Simone, do you get anything out of that? I mean, do you have similar impressions? Anything you'd like to care to comment on with regard to this particular aspect of the series so far?
Because that's the highlight of the whole episode. The whole highlighted. Which I didn't expect that it would take happen that because the last episode is somehow because in the last episode we didn't see the particular part where Francis beating his wife and all that. Yeah, wait.
Right. Yeah. They didn't show it. Even though they showed it, but to be fair, I mean, I guess they showed it like a bunch of times in the episode immediately preceding that one. Yeah, it's weird how that motif kind of fades in and out at times. But it makes sense. I mean, it's like, what do we remember in our lives? Some of the most important things that happen to us, I mean, we forget them completely, and it's strange how that happens. But yeah, I don't know. Things change from day to day. Completely, we become completely different people every single day. And yeah, so Simone, I guess because this episode we're going to have to try to approach it a little differently than how we normally would. I feel like for this episode, we have to explore some of the abstract generalities that it raises, as opposed to the narrative specifics like we usually would. So Simone, I want to start out with a bit of a broad question here. Do you think that people need to work in order to feel as though they have purpose? And if so, why? So again, I'll repeat the question. Do you think people need to work in order to feel as though they have purpose? And if so, why?
I don't think so. In today's standard, yeah, I don't think that it's applicable to everyone. Yeah, I mean, we have different. We can say that we are working. I know there are a lot of definitions to work. It might be some work for a living or work or some sort, but I can say that I think so that you really need to work to find your own purpose.
Sure. And so, well,
maybe in the past it could be the main reason, or because people from the past are really struggling to get through life, and that's some sort of the way that they think that they would be able to find some sort of meaning to it. We can say that it's also applicable to reality right now, but it really depends on the person or particular person where you're in.
Right. Well, and so for you, the reason why this is an important question is because you actually you're working right now. You're working regularly for the first time in your life, and so I want to know, Simone, like, how has that affected you as a person? How has your new job affected you personally? Because it is different depending on who you're asking. But I want to know. Well, let's use you as an example, and then I'll use myself, and then we'll compare it to Franz. But just to start out, give us and the audience a little bit of context regarding your relationship with work.
Yeah. For the meantime, I like my work because it gives me some time to distract myself from contexts that are taking place in my life. There are tons of things that have been going on. I think this week and last week, so a lot of things have been happening. So this is a great way for me to distract myself with all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's how a lot of people see work. It's like they in a way you come to kind of depend on it. It's something that's dependable. It's static. It's a constant. It doesn't really change that much. You can look forward. If all the other aspects of your life are falling apart right in front of you, I mean, it's you still have work, or at least the idea of work, to come back to, because it gives you stability. It gives you regularity. And for me, I have a weird relationship with work. I haven't worked very much because I just haven't had to. I've been very fortunate. I've been blessed with certain safeties, financial and I guess social safeties, that have made it so that I don't, at age 20, I still haven't really had a proper job. I worked one part-time job in my second year of college, but I quit after a month because I just didn't like the way that the manager spoke to me, and so. I could afford that luxury of just dropping everything and just, not having to worry about it at all. As in fact, I haven't even thought about it since it happened, really, but that's, compare that to countless other people who they have to work. That's all they have, really. It's like, you're a coal miner, you're an electrician, you're this or that, and you're a trucker, and that's what you do. That's what you spend the vast majority of your time on. That's who you are. You're mostly your job, because that's all you can afford to be. And all the previous generations that did nothing but work in order to raise the standard to the point where most people don't really have, I mean, where we can all like kind of afford to have hobbies. We have time for hobbies. We have time for self-reflection. We have time for learning and all this sort of thing. We have time to just waste on things like Twitter and Facebook and whatnot. You can just spend most people these days, they can just spend all of their free time just scrolling through fucking stupid bullshit on TikTok and Instagram. It's so meaningless, that's where we're at. Things are almost too good now, the bubble's got to burst eventually. It's like, how much longer is it good? How much more can we get to? It's like all these fucking, all these fucked up teenagers, these teenagers with these fucked up like identity issues and everything. Everyone's pretending to be like a transsexual these days, all that sort of thing. It's like they're just so, they've got nothing better to do, so they invent problems for themselves. I mean, that's the world that we're living in now. The bubble's got to burst eventually. I mean, we're living in Weimar Republic 2.0 at this point. It's a fucking disaster just waiting to happen. It's already happening. Hell, but and I think part of the problem is that people just need work. We need concrete goals. We need to aspire to something. My relationship with work is weird. It's like, I think I've gotten to a point where it's like, I have put off work for so long that I need it now. You know what I mean? I need something. I need purpose. I need to strive for something greater than myself. And people do it in different ways. Whether it's by, I guess, reading a bunch of books or writing something or making music, or helping other people, doing charity work, doing that sort of thing. We all have different ways in which we process these things. And in the modern era, it seems that the most popular thing to do now is the opposite of what was once considered traditional, and that's to just be a virtual and internet loudmouth, I guess. And that's just, it's a whole fuck fest. But it's weird how quickly things have turned. In just the span of 100 years. Things have already kind of, it's something completely different now. We don't know how to handle it. And I have a feeling that we will be able to, I think things are good. I think things are good because, we're at a point now where things seem so bad. It's like, the reason things seem so bad is because they're visible. It's because people are we as a society, we as a species, we're holding ourselves to a higher standard. We're getting on each other's cases about things. And I think that's a good thing. But it's rough, I think we're too tolerant of certain things and, not tolerant enough of others. And, I don't think anyone should be criticized. I don't think anyone should be judged based on anything that they, can't control. You should just be, I think race, sexuality, nationality, political affiliations, and the like, all of that should just be gender, etc. Those should just be things that nobody even talks about. They should just be things that they are what they are, and it doesn't matter either way. It's like, you're not special if you're straight, you're not special if you're gay, you're not special if you're, let's say, white, you're not special if you're, let's say, black. Everyone's just equal. They're all in the same playing field. It's a fucking mess, man. I don't know, and it's this increasing politicization of everything, and it's only a matter of time before the bubble bursts. And I think what people need to understand is that we're all in this together. And we've all got to we've got to stop with these communities. We've got to stop with these groups. We have to start living under one single banner of humanity. We're all human beings. I think that's what we need to, that's the realization that we need to come to. And so, Simone, another general question. I want to know, why do you think abused women stay with their abusers? Why do they forgive them so easily? Why don't they just leave? And so, to repeat those questions again, Simone, why do abused women stay with their abusers? And why do they forgive them so easily? Why don't they just leave? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a nice question. What I noticed, getting back to Mitzi's character, it seems like that she's really she she sees France in a different lens. She some sort of hierarchy. Maybe she acts the way that this is the only person that he needs. She needs in most life, and so it kind of gave her a sense, just like you said in most of our particular most episodes. You said that it's kind of weird how people with some sort of daddy issues and such are now looking for such thing. They want to get what they didn't experience from their childhood, some sort of that things. It's weird.
Yeah.
Kind of even though they are being the kind of prey in a predator relationship, they find some sort of content in it or some satisfaction, some sort of weird fetish or some sort.
Yeah, I think a lot of it just has to do with basic power dynamics. You know what I mean? I think people who are abused, they tend to take it out sort of on themselves. They are their own harshest critics. They are their own worst enemies in a lot of ways. I think the trauma kind of turns itself inward and makes it so that I think someone like Mitzi, for example, I feel like she probably thinks that the relationship that she has with Franz is that's the most that she deserves. She might hate herself to the point where it might be the self-loathing thing. She might hate herself to the point where she doesn't feel as though she deserves like a stable, healthy relationship, that she needs to be punished at times for the things that she does. And I think it all comes down to her relationship with sexuality just as a whole. The fact that she's a prostitute, I mean, it really, that has to fuck you up. I mean, it does. I don't think there's any denying that. So I think someone like her, I think she takes out a lot of her pain on herself, and I think she's looking for this approval that's never going to come. She sees Franz as this source of approval that and it's like what do you get out of a situation like that? It's like the best you can hope for is that this insane person will treat you relatively kindly for a bit before having another outburst and taking their frustrations out on you in like the worst possible ways, beating you, blaming you for all of their problems. Just all this emotional, psychological, physical abuse. It's a fucking mess. But I think a lot of what it comes down to is just sort of unresolved conflict in the mind of the person. And I'm not a psychologist, obviously. I mean, this is all just spitballing bullshit. I just watch a show, talk about it for a little bit, try to process certain aspects of it. But yeah, I think it's mostly just sort of this feedback loop, a behavioral feedback loop. And it's a form of insanity. It's like Einstein said once. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is insanity. That's the definition of insanity, according to Einstein. And I feel like in that sense, going by that definition, I would say that pretty much everyone in the show is fucking insane. But Mitzi in particular, it's absolutely bizarre that she would stay with Franz after all of that happened. I mean, in the last few scenes, her face is completely bloodied up. She's a mess. It has to be a combination of her youth, her naivete, her lack of experience, her bizarre relationship with sexuality, her just everything. It's only a matter of time before something worse happens. And I'm just, it's only a matter of time. I mean, the only difference is whether or not it happens next episode or 2 episodes from now or in the final episode and so forth. But I don't expect good things to come. I mean, do you have any particular predictions, Simone, as to what's going to happen with regards to Franz and Mitzi and their strange relationship?
Yeah, um, the other contexts that I'm now other possibilities that might take place right now is because in this episode, or maybe in the last episode, they mentioned about Mitzi and Ava's um, um, sort of condition or agreement. It's some sort of agreement that Mitzi will let Franz have his kid with Ava. That might be another. The next episode might talk about it, might rotate about it. If some sort of things would really happen if the first time that they tried it didn't really work. And also for now, but how the show will make it a big deal or a big theme in the next possible episode. But for now, what I see something big will come is relationship with Reynold. It seems like that he brought out on his lips. He's carrying too much of it that he might contribute into the show. Right now, this I thought that this would episode work on that particular team that Reynolds will give us a lot of all of the context as my through because of Reynolds, but it didn't happen that in this episode. It some sort of gives it condiments or foundations for or it gives it kind of it's able to find its root in this particular episode um, until the next one.
Right, and so going off of that, Simone, just more broadly, what did you think of Friends and Reynolds' interactions in this episode, and where do you think their relationship stands at the moment?
Yeah, it's weird, that so there are a lot of flaws with Ray Rhino. France didn't consider them, or maybe he's considered all of those things, but maybe he's playing around with Rhino because in the first place, if he's going to burn down all the bridges, because his friend, his one and only, maybe one and only, we expected Mac to be his best friend or true, we made predictions that maybe in the first episode or the second one that even a lot of success or a lot of problems or issues to in regards to Fran's relationship with the people around him might be his friend at school say in the end. But now it seems like that the bridges are already burned down. It's much more applicable to Reinhold rather than in its in Mech. But Mex is it's much more ideal compared to Reinhold.
Yeah. Like I said, the thing with Reinhold is that he feels guilty for what he did to Franz, but isn't able to face it. Just like how he felt guilt for his womanizing, but went to the sinners bench at the Salvation Army and just couldn't go through with seeking I guess atonement for his sins, I suppose. Reinhold, he's a coward. He's afraid of himself. He takes on this, and so his coping mechanism is to just take on this machismo persona and pretend to be like this cold and calculated, ruthless criminal around the other criminals in the syndicate. But when all is said and done, it's like he and Franz are bound to each other in a very sick, very morbid way. They can't get away from one another, and I think Reinhold hates that he is the way he is, and that his weird parasitic relationship with Franz is a sort of indirect manifestation of that. It's like a physical representation of the hate that he has for himself, the self-loathing. I think a lot of the characters in this series, just as a whole, I think most of them hate themselves. In one way or another. The reason why their lives are so bad is just because they make it that way because they give themselves all like a glass ceiling. They limit themselves to what they are able to experience and to how high the quality of their lives can be. I think they limit themselves severely because they don't believe in happiness. They don't believe in peace. They don't believe in serenity because of not only because of all of this stuff that's going on socially and politically, but also just because above all, I think the essence of the let's just say the German character, not to be too general about it, but let's just say fundamentally, I think part of the German character is a very intense, very persistent. What's the word for it? Just undying pessimism, cynicism. I don't think the German people can allow themselves to be happy. Just on the in general, we're talking about philosophy and stuff. It's like a lot of the most misanthropic, most I guess pessimistic thinkers, philosophers, intellectuals, writers, artists come from Germany. I think it's just ingrained in the culture. This feeling, this attitude that life can only be so good, that life can only contain so many different possibilities and so forth, right? I mean, Arthur Schopenhauer, he's a perfect example of someone who just does not believe in the good to anything, really. Goethe, who wrote The Sorrows of Young Werther, the apprenticeship of Wilhelm Meister, among other things. His books are all about how people just are constantly undermining themselves, and how our human faults are always getting in the way of our happiness, and always keeping us from being the people that we should be, or keeping us from leading the lives that we should be leading. And there's an aspect of that in this as well, and very much so. And I don't know, Simone, would you care to comment on that? This strangely inherent pessimism this inherent quality to the German character that I feel is here in Berlin Alexanderplatz. Is there anything you'd care to comment on with regard to that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it weird? If I'm going to compare how people work here in the Philippines, or maybe the whole Asian population, not much, but we kind of enjoy our lives blissfully. We kind of find joy or meaning in sort of just small things. Kind of just like you said, that it seems like that we're not really able to fully examine our whole lives because we're kind content with the little that we have, or some sort. But that exactly, you can argue in that matter. But compare it with the German people. The German people lives are really complicated. There are a lot of contexts that they are into, or there are a lot of problems that they can just talk about in just a matter of time. It's just a couple of words, and that's it, and they can move on. But every each of one of them has a lot of burdens that they're carrying on their shoulders, that they can really get into this some sort of trauma that they had experienced to approach life in this way.
Yeah. And I also think there's just a more general thing that isn't necessarily connected to historical events and whatnot. Like, let's try our best to put World War II and the Holocaust and everything out of the picture for a moment, and just think about the German people and German culture in a vacuum of sorts, right? In a sort of abstract vacuum, right? So, there was this interesting comment that someone made once that it's not good to be too intellectual. It's not good to be too smart or whatever. It's not good to be too aware, let's just say, because I think if you see things too clearly, you're less likely to act. And if you understand the implications and contexts of a particular scenario or entity or whatever, you might not be able to handle it. It might not be a good thing to know too much. And I think that's what the German people kind of are they're the best example of. They're the perfect example of what happens when you know too much. You rot a little bit. Something turns in you. You get a little darker than you should. It's sort of I don't know what it means. Maybe it means that we as human beings we're never meant to know. We might not be built for, a certain amount of knowledge. It's like if we get to a degree of understanding and everything that exceeds the evolutionarily allotted amount, it makes us very bitter. I think a lot of that comes down to just, I think when you get to a point where you understand too much, you also understand that there are certain things that we cannot control. Like, for example, like the fact that we're all gonna die someday. It's like there's no getting around that. You can do whatever you want. It's like it's not, you're not going to get away from that fact. You're going to live your life. You're going to make certain decisions, and you're going to miss out on a lot. Because you can only do so much. You're not going to be able to do everything that you want to do. You're not going to be able to, to be as happy as you want to be, because life's always going to get in the way, and then you're going to die, and that's going to be it. It all ends, and it could end at any minute. You could get hit by a car, you could get cancer, You could get, well, I guess whatever's happening these days, you could get shot. Think about how many people who just go to work, they work at a convenience store or something, and then just some fucking punk kid or something shows up, pulls a pistol out and fucking blows their brains out. That happens all the time. I mean, things such, and a million similar things too. You could lose your job at work and just spend the rest of your life homeless, 5 years, you get sick and die in the cold, all these things can just happen at any minute, really. It's completely unpredictable. Cars can explode, if a bolt kind of shifts out of place and then the engine stalls and you're fucking dead. Your loved ones can die at any moment. Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is permanent. And in fact, the only time that you're ever really safe is when you're dead. Because once you're dead, that's it. That's over. There's no really going back from that. So you're only really safe in life when you are no longer in it, when you are no longer living life. That's the only time that you're ever really exempt from any of the bullshit that it can throw your way. And maybe that's peace. Maybe that's I don't know. But there are just certain harsh truths like that you can't avoid. They're completely unavoidable. The heat death of the universe, the death of the individual, the inescapability of sorrow and all of that sort of thing. I think the Germans just, they for whatever reason, they have this weird, long before, and we're talking about like medieval Germany and it just, for really their entire history, they've had this pessimism. They obsess over that one particular aspect of I guess, philosophical and intellectual thinking. And I don't know. Is there anything else you'd like to comment on there, Simone, before we move on to the next question? We're coming up to the end of the discussion, so only a few more to go.
Yeah. I don't. It's weird. It seems like that they're kind of. It's hard to explain it that it's kind of rooted in the culture itself, but maybe much more on. But what culture really is, it's based on how we interact with our environment. What are this German people environment is, or is how they can. They really. There's. It seems like that there's not really an end into this kind of culture.
Yeah. Okay, so we did the little philosophical portion of the discussion, but now to kind of to wrap things up with more specific narrative questions, Simone. How do you feel about Franz joining up with Pum's gang again, even after all that's happened? I mean, that's kind of weird, right? Like he lost his arm. What the hell's going on with that whole situation? Because it is a bit baffling, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really it's a way. That's why all the other people that are in or in Pam's business are also shocked that he's in there. What Reinhold is really now. He's trying to know what what really Franz really meant in getting back into the business, because it seems like if a normal person would experience such thing that what happened to France, he might have tons of resentment towards people that are not only to Reinhold himself, but also to everyone that are related to the gang. But France is really weird, and it's like Reinhold. I'm also curious that what France really meant by it. Why is his goal? What is his goal, or what is it for him to get involved again in such thing? Because in normal scenario, a person would the only thing might that might go into that situation is when you want to get some revenge of some sort or resentment to that people, and you want to give them a lesson of some sort. It's weird.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think Franz is even capable of, Franz is dangerous and he's violent and all that, but I don't think he's capable of being as cunning as Reinhold and the others give him credit for. I don't think I don't think he works that way. I think if anything, he might kill Reinhold in a fit of rage, just a heat of the moment type situation, but I don't think he's the calculating type. I don't think he can plan things ahead and have that sort of, he's not like a Reinhold. They're different in that respect, very different. Franz is impulsive, whereas Reinhold is, he is precipitory, I would say. He plans things out long ahead of time. Franz doesn't operate that way. But I think it really is. I think it's it's going back to what I was saying earlier about how a lot of these characters they don't really they underestimate themselves and they keep themselves back by being so negative, I suppose. And that's what Franz is kind of doing. He's lost hope, he's so far away from the person that he was in the beginning of the series, in episode 1. He's just, his resolutions have all fallen completely out the window, and he's not even really acknowledging them anymore. He doesn't even really notice it, but it's all fallen apart. It's all gone to shit. It's over. It's pretty much over. It's like he's buried himself once again. He's just fallen back into everything. He's doing what he's doing, and now like it's to the point where all he can aspire to be is either like a weird reverse pimp that doesn't work, that just stays at home and has the wife take care of him, which is not, that's against the standard of the time. That's option A. Or option B is to just, well, I guess he has 3 options. Option B is to be a communist or whatever, an anarchist, and go to all these meaningless political rallies where people come up with ideas that don't go anywhere. It's like anarchism is a completely self-defeating philosophy. But Franz, tries to indulge in it because it's what's what he feels is available to him, and it's not the only option. It isn't. He could be a newspaper vendor all the time. It might be hard, sure, but he could compromise. He could figure something out with Mitzi. Mitzi could bring in half the money. Franz could work as a newspaper vendor, good, honest work, or as a shoelace salesman, whatever bullshit job that he has to do. He could do it and do it just to do it and to be on the straight and narrow. Relatively speaking, he could be a lot better off than he is. They could go on vacation. They could move. They could just get the hell out of there while they still can. They could do about a million things, but they don't do any of it because they're just so demoralized. They're just so myopic, so narrow-minded, so narrow-sighted. They completely limit themselves. And that's what's going on here. Franz, for whatever reason, he's gotten this idea in his head that the most he can aspire to is being part of this stupid criminal syndicate that's fucked him over, and that's probably either going to get him killed or just, it's all going to blow up. And yet he's committed to that path. He is committed to it. And it's like, you can look at that and kind of, and you can look at that and scratch your head in confusion and yell at the TV and go like, what the fuck are you doing, Franz? Why are you acting this way? But it's like, how many of us how many stupid, irrational things have we all done in our lives? You know what I mean? How many weird fucking habits have we had that we just are completely baffling to the outsider, that just don't make any goddamn sense at all. It's like when you know full well why you're, that you're digging a hole for yourself, and yet you keep digging. Dig. It's like how just to give an example, personal example. It's like how I in high school, would refuse procrastination. It's like how I refused to study for things until the very last minute, and I'd like put myself into panic. Those are the worst fucking, the worst moments of my life were just, sitting there panicking, realizing that like I've just put something off for so long that I even if I study the entire night before, I'm not going to be able to do as well as I could have had I just studied for like even just like 20 minutes a day over the course of that week. So if I have a test on Friday, if I'd studied from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and the night, even the morning before in some other classes on Friday, I would, if I just done it for like 20 minutes each day of that week, I would have been fine. But no, I couldn't be bothered to do that, so I had to stay up the whole night before, all Thursday night. And it's just like, you put yourself in those situations. It's like, why do you do it? Because we're not rational beings. We're fucked up people. All of us are fucked up. I don't think I think you're actually more fucked up as a person if you're not fucked up. You have to be fucked up. It's the human condition. And there's no getting around that. What it comes down to is how you respond to it, how you handle it. I think that the moment that you make peace with the fact that you are not perfect, that's the moment that you begin to get better. But that's the only way you're going to do it. You have to accept that. You have to accept that, and a lot of people don't. A lot of people bury that little kernel of truth beneath all sorts of terrible coping mechanisms and stuff. A lot of people keep themselves at like the age of like 18 mentally. Their entire lives they act like fucking juveniles, because they just don't want to accept the fact that they are fundamentally broken. But yeah, that's just how I feel about that. Is there anything you'd like to comment on, Simone?
Maybe I am the same situation.
Sure, yeah. I think we all are, to a certain extent, to varying degrees. Even people who are ostensibly successful. You could have this fantastic fucking lawyer earning, 6-figure income, beautiful wife, successful children and all that, promising children. That guy could be an alcoholic. He might hate himself. He might hate his life. It might mean nothing to him. and there might not be any other way around it. You know, it's just sometimes people are just, you know, they just, I don't know. It's baffling. It's just like for example, Rabbit from the John Updike, you know, the Rabbit novels, Rabbit Engstrom. His whole life, I mean, from the books are, you know, it's from the 1950s to the 1980s. It's just his entire life. He wastes his whole life just being completely unsatisfied by everything. And it's like he, on the surface, things are going pretty good. You know, are going well for him. He has a stable job. He has a loving wife. He has a healthy, you know, son. But he throws it all away. He throws it all away by being completely discontent with everything. It's never good enough. And it's all because he's just he's hung up on his failed high school basketball career of all things. He makes himself washed up. He doesn't do anything. All of the things he does, the whole first book in that series, Rabbit Run, is just about this affair that he has. He cheats on his wife right in front of her. He cheats. He lives with another woman. He moves in with another woman, and it's in this community. You know, all of the people that he's ever known. You know, he's a small town boy, so it's like all of his friends, all of his you know, family's friends, all of the people that he knows. They all know full well that he's just, you know, that he's left his wife for this you know, like just ugly, you know, just terrible other woman. And why has he done it? It's because he's just not satisfied with anything, and he refuses to handle that in a healthy way. And his unhappiness just completely defines him. He lets it consume him, and we all do it at some point or another. I don't know what the solution really is, because sometimes it's just too much. You know, sometimes it's just that baffling aspect of the human character. It's like, why do we kill each other? Why do we do all of these things? It's like, who the fuck knows, really? No amount of psychology is ever really going to account for everything, I don't think. I think there's a certain part of ourselves that we just have to recognize as undefinable, as baffling, as just incomprehensible. But I don't know. Incomprehensible, whatever. But to end off you know, the discussion, Simone, last, you know, specific narrative question. What did you think of the fight between Franz and Mitzi? I mean, that's the big scene. Let's cover that real quick before we sign off for the night. So what did you think? Was it a good scene? Was it a bad scene? Did it go the way you expected it to? All of that. Just give me some impressions about it.
Maybe what can I say about it? A lot of things that have been happening are not really the way that they should be on the normal case scenario. You know, because they a very different set of values that they believe into, that they are into. So it is. But in the normal case scenario, maybe it's the way that it should be. It's the exact same thing that right in front of the beginning, Franz know that Mitzi is a prostitute, and that might be the what happened in the first place. But now it's just like an on-end situation with Mitzi and him.
Right, yeah, maybe it's the most appropriate outcome. You know, it was what it was going to be from the outset. I mean, it was a matter of time, like we've said. But yeah, it seems kind of annoying, to be honest. I don't know. Oh god, it's like the way the actress playing Mitzi is like yelling. It's just like, oh my god, I don't know. And then Franz is like a freak. It's just everyone's a weirdo, man. I don't know. But yeah, I guess that nothing else to really say about it, to be honest. It's just, and that's the interesting thing, right? Like this scene that's supposed to have all this impact really just comes and goes. And I'm sure that was intentional, but I kind of feel like the execution was a little further off than I would have liked in regard to, you know, realizing what it was that the author had in mind when writing that and whatnot. But yeah, I guess that brings us to the end of our discussion of episode 11 of 14 of Berlin Alexanderplatz. It was called Knowledge is Power, and the Early Bird Catches the Worm. And, you know, to be honest, this is the first episode that we've had so far that I don't really get the title. I don't see how it connects to what happens in the episode. And, you know, while we're here, now that we're at the end, you know, I'm just going to be honest. Like, this is probably the first episode that we've had in the series so far that I really didn't want to watch, to be honest with you. I'm kind of just ready for the show to be over with at this point. I didn't really like watching this episode that much, to be honest. I didn't really even I don't know. And so, Simone, I mean, as I always ask you at the end of these, how do you think this podcast episode went? How do you think the discussion was? Good, bad, in between? You know.
Yeah, maybe in between, because this particular episode is really weird, you know. Yeah, just like I agree with you that it's not like that this episode is giving me a reason to drop off the show. If I'm going to watch it in the if I'm going to binge watch the show, I may this episode might give me the reason to all of the scene because it's I get some of the point of this particular but maybe the problem is the way they executed the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. And I think also part of it too, and this is the really interesting thing about these things, right? How they work. I honestly feel like maybe the reason why it isn't as good as it should be is because like I think maybe it's like we've been watching this for so long that it's changed us in ways that are kind of hard to account for, I guess. And so maybe part of it is just the fact that the show has matured us to the point where we like don't even we're too old for it now. We've outgrown it already, because we've done this like 11 times in a row now. We've spent so much time with it. We've incubated in it. It's like maybe it's kind of like how you have to, as a kid, you grow up and then you have to leave your house. It's like you can't live with your parents forever, no matter what your culture's like. It's like it doesn't work. You get to a point where you outgrow that and you have to move on. You have to become independent. I kind of feel like this is what's happening with us. It's like we have to break away from this now. We've spent too much time here. It's given us kind of almost everything that it is to that it has to give us. We've just it's time for something else. And I think that's just an inevitability. We can't even really. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It might not be anything. Kind of just maybe it's just one of those things. It's just one of those natural processes. I mean, how do you feel, Simone? I mean, do you think we've outgrown the series already? 11 out of 14 episodes in.
I think that's the way to describe it. It's in the first 5 episodes we have a lot of hope this episode. I mean, we have a lot of positive predictions in this, but right now all my predictions are leading me to hoping that this show will end soon.
Yeah, yeah. It's just one of those things, It's like we started out with so much hope, so much optimism, and now it's all falling apart. But now it's like, yeah, I don't know. That's how it usually goes, though, isn't it? I mean, it really is. It's like the first episode, we were all like, it felt like there were endless possibilities. Anything could happen. The whole world was right there for us for the taking. I mean, with this show, anyway, And then as we went along, it's like I feel like the show, it really helped us just spending so many hours, just logging so many hours into talking about it, picking apart every single detail. Like I feel like we've gotten to a point now where we're not as shaky as we used to be when we first started this channel. It's like we're not. For me anyway, there's no anxiety with the camera anymore. I don't mind being recorded at all. I can come up with the things that I need to say. I don't have to worry about the script as much as I used to. I'm not. There's none of that blankness anymore. I've gotten competent, and it was through this show that competence emerged. But now it's like it's to the point where it's like, God, I'm restless. Like I can't take this anymore. I don't want to be on this show anymore. I'm ready to take on other things. I'm ready for the next evolution, I guess. And it's so weird how that works. It really is. It's like I don't know. Just from day to day, things can change so fundamentally. It's like I could never watch another episode of this again and not feel any way about it. It's just. I completely forget about it. It would just fade into the ether for me. And to be honest, I'm almost like we will do it. We will grind through the last 3 episodes. But there's a part of me that's just kind of dreading it. And it's so weird to think that I looked forward to it all these other times, and it was something that I really wanted to get into. And now that we're at the end of it, it's like, God, I can't stand it anymore. Maybe that's how Reinhold feels about his women or whatever. But yeah, I don't know, Simone. Anything you'd like to close out with for tonight's episode? Anything you want to say before we go bye-bye?
Yeah. It's maybe I hope that maybe I'm checking on the episode left. We have 3 more episodes left, but this one is kinda will run 2 hours long. So maybe there's some bit of a plot twist or maybe surprise. I hope so, but I don't know.
Yeah. This podcast episode was weird. It was a bit all over the place, but I kind of feel like in its own confusing way, it was actually pretty good. I feel like we still managed to pull through. But if I'm being honest, I had like this Oh God, I didn't really want to record tonight, but we did it, hour plus. I also had this weird coffee too. It was like really like a fucked up coffee. It was like, on the label it said it's like one of the strongest coffees you can drink. That's how they advertise it, right? I drank it like 3 hours ago, and I'm still like, my heart's like beating a little faster than it should, and I'm kind of like, I don't know. It was really hard for me to sit through the episode. I was just like freaking out about it. So that's why I'm a little all over the place right now. But I kind of feel like it's appropriate, for an episode like this. It's very fitting. It's like it's weird how everything sort of corresponds. It's like you get a weird episode, we get a weird podcast episode. I feel like if nothing else, this podcast does a very good job of kind of capturing the essence of whatever it is that we're talking about, right? And so, but anyway, in terms of housekeeping, before we go, guys, I want to make an announcement real quick. We're going to be launching a new podcast series called the Crimson Congress, right? So that's the Crimson Congress, and it's basically going to be, how this podcast is a review podcast. The Crimson Congress will be like a talk podcast where Simone and I and my father and other people, other guests that we bring on, we'll just sit around and talk, have a little chit chat, see if we can get anything out of it. It'll be much more casual, much more broad than these, because obviously when you're talking about when you're reviewing something, you have to kind of focus on what you're reviewing, right? But with the Crimson Congress, the hope is that the idea is that it will give us a space in which to talk about really anything. And so, yeah, hopefully that should be interesting. We'll probably be launching that immediately after we finish Berlin Alexanderplatz. So after you guys see the next 3 episodes of ITP, that will probably be when we launch the very first episode of the Crimson Congress. And so, yeah, the Berlin Alexanderplatz stuff will end on episode 37, so ITP 037. And then from there, from 038 on, we'll be doing some standalone stuff for a while. And after we get to episode 50, from episode 51 on, we'll take on another series. But for the time being, we're going to need a really long break after Berlin. We need to kind of branch out and do what I guess the channel was always meant to be for, what the podcast was always meant for, which is just standalone, self-contained reviews, like we did with Andrei Rublev, like we did with Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters, so on and so forth, just taking on a single movie at a time, that sort of thing. Really looking forward to that. Really looking forward to the next chapter of Imperial Tides history. And yeah, I think the journey's been good so far, and I thank you all for taking it with us. Make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more content, and take care, and bye for now. Peace.